Hello everyone. Thank you for being here today and thank you for listening to my presentation. Today I'll be talking about ELL students and the challenges in supporting those students in education. Well, my name is Mariana Ray, and to start us off, I'll give you a little background about me so you can understand a little better the motives and why I chose to research about this topic. So I'm an immigrant from Brazil. I moved to the United States in 2016. I came as an exchange student through the au pair program. And this program is, the intention of it is to be fully immersed in the English language in order for the students to gain all the English skills that they hope and need to better themselves when they go back to their home country. So this program, you're fully immersed by living with a American host family and provide childcare for their kids. That way you are 100% of your time speaking and learning English. And that's why I did for 2 years from 2016 to 2018. And in order to do and participate in this program, I had to complete some college credits, which was required by the immigration for my type of visa. And that was my first experience in navigating the educational system in the US, which at that time was higher education for me. But when I came, I did not speak any English, although I did have a good reading comprehension because I took some English classes in Brazil and I could fairly communicate through writing, but my speaking was really bad. We don't usually practice the speaking that much when we're in Brazil or in a foreign country. We usually focus more on writing and reading. And so I didn't speak any English for at least the first 3 months. I would say it took me about a year to actually be able to fully communicate and express my thoughts. I still struggle a lot, as you may gonna see throughout this video. More towards the end, you're gonna see I struggle a lot when I speak a lot and have to process a lot of information in English, but so that was the breaking point when I decided to join TCC and become a teacher, because I knew the challenge and the experience in navigating the system was tough. It was not easy, and there was a lot of misinformation, there's lack of support, and I know it could be better. So I joined TCC and start studying early education, and later on move into the elementary program, which I believe most of you are also part of. And my ultimate goal is to become an ELL specialist and an ESL teacher. But let's say that unfortunately, or fortunately, because I really hope to change this scenario for the future generations, my focus and the why I want to research about this topic is in those sentences that we hear quite often in the classroom, that we hear quite often from people experiences. And me now, as a TCC also student staff, I had the opportunity to work with many students from many backgrounds, and I still hear that, and it's sad. It makes me sad that students have to go through that, right? I really hope that someday we can offer them with an equal education where they feel heard and they feel valid and important, and they feel like they own their education. So some of the sentences that are also presented on the videos that I'm listing at the end as an extra resource for you to research on your own time and explore this content if you would like. So we hear, I felt like I didn't belong. I was never asked to share what I had. I knew a lot. I knew what they were doing. I just couldn't be part of it because I didn't speak the language. I felt like essentially I was punished. It almost made my language something not to be desired. The teacher should know what language I speak. She should try to learn more about me. And specifically, this one gets me a lot. And not surprisingly, this sentence comes from one of those videos where you're going to see all the Brazilian kids telling about their experience in learning English, that their teacher speaks Spanish to them, and just a little historic content. So you're aware of that if somehow you're not. Brazil is the only South America country that speak Portuguese. We were colonized by Portugal, and differently than what people believe, because most of the coastal Pacific countries such as Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, Venezuela, Colombia, and so on, right? They were colonized by the Spain, and therefore they speak Spanish, but we don't. We in Brazil don't. We speak Portuguese. And in fact, we speak Brazilian Portuguese, which is different from Portugal. And although it can be similar to Spanish sometimes, it's not the same language. And we can, a lot of people can understand. I can because I speak Spanish a little bit, but sorry, it's not the same language. And it's a very frustrating experience because it denies our identity. It showed the lack of research and the lack of empathy that the professor has to learn more about the student, right? So this one really gets me, and it's something that I have been through myself. Sometimes they give me different work. I want to learn the same thing as everybody else. And here we will be talking about to later on about misplacing those students, right? Feeling that, assuming that they are not capable to do the same work, assuming that they will not be able to handle, and that is bad. Sometimes they make fun of me for not speaking very well. I hope you take a little bit of time to let us sink in with you, but and I hope you also engage in change for the future, so we do not have to encounter students feeling like that anymore. But let's move on. I'll give you a little background of the topic. And for those who do not know, what is ELL? According to federal law, English language learners are students who are not born in the United States or whose native language other than English, who come from an environment where a language other than English has a significant impact on individuals' level of English language proficiency. So those students, ELL students, basically English is not their primary language, or they have had no contact with English in a way that they cannot communicate or understand in English, right? And they're either immigrants, refugees, so they're not born in the US, or they can be often born in the US and do not speak English. We have example of kids who grow up in reservations, and they're raised in their tribal language, right? And then when they enter the school system, they do not speak English. We have often seen kids from immigrant parents. More often we see kids from Mexican immigrant parents, where in their household they speak Spanish all the time, and within their relatives and their environment, they go to church that speak Spanish, they go to the Spanish or the Latin market, they spend out time with cousins and tias and so on. So they're surrounded by the Spanish language, therefore they don't speak English. So just a little contest. Sorry, just a little context. English language learners can be born or cannot be born in the US. That's not only about immigrant kids, okay? Data about the challenges in ELL. And here we'll be talking a little bit about the data around. Of course, there's much more, but I select three main data around this topic, which is the rapid growth of ELL students. And historically, we know the different immigration laws and immigration system that has occurred throughout the history of United States. So we had the First Nations living here, then we have the white European colonizing, and then enslaved Africans. Then later on, we have immigrants from Italy, the Japanese population, Irish, and the Mexican farmers coming to work, and so on. So we have seen a shift throughout the history of the United States in the ethnical profile of its population, and that continues to grow, right, even more. So the data say that by 2026, 1 in every 4 children in our USA public schools will be a English language learner. By the year 2030, 40% of the school population will speak English as a second language. And that tells us or make us think, if we're not supporting the students right now, if we're not offering the support, if we're not offering them the support they needed, if we're not able to fulfill their needs right now, how does that look to the future? Well, what we're doing to change for the future, because it's increasing. The second data is around misplacing ELL students as a learning disability. So we have seen test scores and standardized, sorry, there's some words that can be complicated to me. Here's your ELL student, standardized tests that will place that child in a certain grade, or will tell you how well they perform or do not perform in math and science and English and so on, right? But there's also those tests along the way that would tell you the student's a slow learner. And for that, I have a great article at the end of this presentation that calls An Indian Father's Plea. And it's a letter from a Native American parent whose kid is entering kindergarten in public school, and that is the letter to the teacher saying how the teacher is invalidating that kid's experience, and that teacher has placed the kid as a slow learner, but in reality the father start listing a amount of things that the kid can do in their own language, on their environment, that it's equal to a child who is an English speaker. So the letter is it's beautiful. I highly recommend you reading, but it's an eye-opening for us future teachers to pay attention to those big part of the identities of those children, right? So we often see ELL being placed as slow learners, but in reality, they just speak another language, or the way they learn differently because they're from a different culture. So they have a different learning style that is not compatible with the American style. but that does not make them a slow learner, makes them a different learner. The data say 63% of ELL graduate from high school compared with the overall national rate of 82%. And in this data, we can see that when we misplace those kids, sometimes it would take an extra year to graduate. They will need some extra classes. And therefore, we do have some racial and economic issues that impact the high school graduation, and we know, but here specifically, we're talking about the ELL students. So not offering the support they need will delay their graduation, right? Cultural and linguistic barriers may influence test scores that appear to indicate a learning disability. Moving on, we have 2% of ELL are enrolled in gifted programs compared with 7.3% of gifted non-ELL students. So here's 3 things that I see the issue with that. First, that kid may be gifted, but gifted in their language. Therefore, when they do the tests, the test cannot identify how gifted they are because it's not in their language and they fail the test. Second, parents are not aware of those programs because they do not speak English. Sometimes this information don't make to them, right? And third, we hear the quote say, we are losing talent kids from immigrant families who do not know their way around the American system, right? They do not know how to navigate that. They do not, and it's the language barrier, the third, they do not know how to express to the teacher that their kid is gift, is talent, because they don't speak English. And the third data I'd like to talk about is about funds. So here I make a mention about the No Child Left Behind Law Act that brings standardized tests to the school. And we know that's a big issue, especially with English language learners, because those children do not learn at the same pace or do not learn at the same level with those standardized tests, right? Maybe they need a different approach sometimes, and they need a extra time, and the standardized tests don't let that happen. They either do it or don't do it. They either perform or don't perform, and that's it. And that's not the reality. Not only our students, but students in general. We come from different backgrounds, and we have different learning styles, and this impacted the way we perform on tests. And that doesn't mean we do not know the content or that we haven't learned the content, but maybe we learn differently, right? And another issue with it is because that brings funds to the program. So that was initial thought of funding those programs and delivering the support where it needs to, but those funds have not aligned with the growth, which is the first data that I mentioned with in this slide. The funds have not aligned with the growth of ELL students. So since 2014, schools have received the exact same amount, but the number of students have grown. So instead of students receiving more each year, they are receiving less because they have to share with more people that are joining that program. And here's a little visual data. It shows the distribution of ELL students across the country, where the largest community we have is here in California, followed by Texas. And then we also have big communities here and also Florida. And we know Texas here has the border with Mexico. California has a very diverse population. So does Florida. Also have 11.8 here in Washington. So those states where we have a wider diversity, we can see a larger number of English language learners. Here's another data, little graph that show the distribution of ELL students throughout the grades. And we see that the bigger range of students fall within the elementary education years, which is from kindergarten through here stops at the fourth grade, declining more towards between the third and the fourth grade. But what we talk about, what we often talk about is the foundation years, right? Kindergarten, first grade, where those kids are learning how to read, how to write, how to communicate. They're learning how to build vocabulary. So kindergarten first, and here is still second grade. Although some kids take a little bit more time, and but this foundation year. So where those resources are going, right? Are we putting those resources here at the 8th and 9th grade, or are we really designating those resources in the beginning in elementary education, or even the early childhood education, where these children are making the transitioning, these children are transitioning between their home and their home language to be fully immersed in a English environment, right? So it is that's the time they need the most support, so they can build all the skills, they can learn efficiently, and that they can move on smoothly throughout their academic journey. And then in the bottom, we see the distribution of EOL students by home language, and leading us all, we have 75.2% of the students who are Spanish speakers. Our Hispanic community is big, and then here's a breakdown among the other language. Moving on, we're talking about the challenge. Try move that throughout. I will try to move through this slide quickly. I know it's been keeping the time here. It's been a long time, but the challenge I see the most through the articles I read was the culture and language barrier, which falls into lack of support and exclusion rather than inclusion. So a teacher who cannot speak that student's language or have no cultural awareness about that student and where they came from, or where the parents are from, what type of environment that child grew up on, doesn't allow the teacher to empathize with that student experience. Therefore, they're less likely to offer the support that student need. So lack of support. And because of that, they often excluded those children from participating, from feeling like they belong to the classroom, right? The dominant culture usually takes place, and those kids feel excluded. Lack of representation and teaching training. Lack of representation is very, to me, it's a very important topic, because a child, specifically that child that falls within the foundation years that we talked the slide before, who is building their identity, they need to see themselves represented. And we know that the teaching field is very white dominant and female dominant. That those children, especially the ELL learners, they need someone who understands their challenge, who know what they're going through, or what type of support they need, right? So to me, lack of representation is still a big thing. And we often see around this topic the lack of teaching training and teaching preparation to deal with the challenges that come with English language learners. How teachers can support, or what type of resources are appropriate for, excuse me, those children, right? Investing in professional development. And of course, those two topics influence in the way that a child will perform academically. So we see an increase in dropout rates, kids withdrawing from activities, from the content, not being able to relate or engage with. We're seeing low grades, low test scores, and so on. And here you can visually see what I was talking about the teacher training. National Center for Education Statistics, just 27% of teachers report feeling well prepared to teach ELL, and only 12.5% of teachers with ELL in the classroom have participated in ELL related training during the past 3 years. So if those teachers who have ELL students in their classroom but not well prepared or well equipped to perform or to support the students, how you think those students are going through education? Are they really taking full advantage of what's being taught to them? Are they really learning as they should? Is that really fair or equal? Something to think about it. And here, of course, I talk about different experiences. We know each student has their unique personality and so on, right? But we often see ELL students as those quiet students who choose to not participate, who choose to be by themselves or do the work by themselves, so they don't have to interact with other classmates or the professors. They are often quiet. They can also be very observant. So because they rely on peers and teachers' gestures to understand and assimilate the content, you see them observing a lot. They're observing their classmate most of the time. So the classmate closed the red book, it's time to put the red book away. If the classmate put a jacket on, it's time to go outside. If they see the child grabbing their lunchbox, time for recess. If the teacher raised their hand, they know it's time to raise their hands, and so on. So they relied a lot on those gestures to understand the situation when words cannot be said or understood completely. Those students can often be nervous or anxious, right? And so let me tell you, it's an overwhelming experience, very overwhelming, sometimes very stressful. Sometimes you just don't want to deal with it, but you have to, so you're anxious. It's frustrating a lot of times. So you're nervous, you're angry, you're sad. Those are all feelings that unfortunately is part of the process that we try to minimize, right? We don't want kids feeling that way. Often labeled as lazy or troublemaker. So there's the extreme. You can see that child being very quiet, not really want to engage, not having that many friends, being very homesick and so on. But you also have that child that talks a lot, that moves a lot, that's often distracted, that's often doing something else, that talks to their classmate all the time, that bugs their classmate all the time. Because that child is engaged, we see here the last one, the child can relate to the content. So you can only think about someone that does not speak the language being locked in a classroom from 8 to 3 and they're not understood, or they're not, like, they cannot see what's going on or understand what's going on. That child has to find something else to be occupied for that time, right? So they can often be labeled as troublemakers. And here, how we can minimize this issue. And based on my research and the articles I have read for this assignment, culturally, among other things, of course, I have mentioned funds, which is a very important thing, and teacher training. Another very important thing in my perspective is culturally responsive teaching. So culturally responsive teaching is a research-based approach to teaching. It connects the students' culture, language, and life experience with what they learn in school. These connections help students access curriculum and develop higher level academic skills. And a quick example. At my first quarter at TCC, I was an AB student. I was very nervous, overwhelmed. See all feelings that we just mentioned. And I took English 9-5 with Professor Sabina Endicott, which is a immigrant professor from Germany. So here goes. Representation matters, and it really does. She knew what I was going through. She knew the challenge and somehow could empathize with my experience. But what she did, not only for me, but for the whole classroom, assuming that we all come in, not because I come from another country, but among the other students, we all come from different backgrounds and have and experience the world differently. She allowed us to explore the content in a way that was comfortable for us. So in my example, we had to talk about politics. So instead of talking about politics in the US, I was able to talk about politics in Brazil, about Brazil, right? About the government and issues that was going on in my own country. So I could do my research in Portuguese, and which was comfortable and easier for me. But I still had to write my essay in English. I still had to present in English. Still had to discuss with my class in English. So what she did, it's a very good example of culturally responsive teaching. She allowed my culture to be part of the learning process. That way I could connect with content without losing the experience of learning and developing the skills I need. So that's why it's so important. I had a great performance on that class, and this experience will be forever stuck with me because it really changed the way I see teaching. Like all the students had great presentation. We were able to learn from one another. I learned from different cultures and even cultures within the US. It was a great experience for me. And some of the contents that's part of the culturally responsive approach is having a EDI curriculum, so equity, diversity, and inclusion curriculum, empathy and respect. So have that as a core value for your practice. Build relationships, and specifically with children and family in this case, not because the kids are small. So develop this connection, learn about them, what they need, what type of support they need, what are you looking for, how you can support them, what their goals, what they want for their children. So you all can work together to achieve the same goal and you're not working on different goals. Clear communication. Invest in professional development, knowing that cultures change all the time. And although we cannot learn all the languages and cultures of the world, but it's an ongoing process, always learning, keep on learning. Don't forget about that. And we also talk about using physical activities, visual aids, and environment as a whole to teach, right? Take advantage and use the whole classroom, your whole body, use movies, music, toys, books, different things. So if you're teaching about river, for example, rivers, you can talk about rivers in Washington State and US and around the world. You can use books, you can take them to the museum, you can make them draw a river and so on. So use different things so the students can pick the one that they can relate it to or the one they're comfortable to explore, right? And then you give them the chance to learn from different lenses and perspectives. And to finish, my conclusion is based on a quote from one of the materials that's listed below. So after this PowerPoint, you see some videos, articles that you can read and explore on your own time about ELL students. I hope that helps you to explore a little bit more and learn if you somehow are not familiar with ELL, so we can all get together and provide a better future for these students, right? And be aware that we will encounter them at a certain time and more in the future too, so we can be prepared for. Because what we want are, I believe we all want as our goal as teacher is to provide a great experience for our students in our classroom. So the conclusion comes from one of these videos that say, when they walk into our classroom, they're not empty vessels. In the past, our goal was to fill them with knowledge because we assumed they didn't have any. Today, we know better. They are rich. Their experience are valid. Maricela Rincon. So remind ourselves that when children pass the classroom door, they bring with them what we call the invisible backpack. Their experience matter, their background matters, their identities matter, and we should value every single part of them. The good ones, the challenging ones, because that makes who they are. They make the best for them to feel confident, to feel safe, and to feel welcome in our classroom. And another great quote that I would like to end us off is from this book here, for white folks who teach in the hood and the rest of you all, reality, pedagogy, and urban education, from Christopher. And it says, our elbows are together, yet our hearts are apart. If we want to learn with each other, we should also learn about each other. So to me, that means empathy above all, right? If we want to learn with each other, we need to learn about each other. We no room for assumptions here. We got to make the space for people to tell their story, to speak up, because we don't hold the truth. That's all for today. As I said, this content will be available if you would like to look more into this topic. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. Sorry it was long. I try my best to keep it short, but I appreciate you.